What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Golf Bag podcast. I'm your host, Redkacheek, and this week is PGA Championship week at Aronimink Golf Club. So I got a little bit more of a scripted show for today to look at Aronimink because we haven't really seen it in a number of years and look through, the last time it was played and some interesting nuggets to take away from there. And then dive into how I used FGB Studio this week for back testing some of the PGA Championships the last couple of years. So we have a pretty strong model to look at today. So what I'm going to do first off is plug fantasygolfbag.com really quickly for the PGA Championship. So you can, we have free trials, but you can use, I think it is, one second, let me find the code. I think it is Save 15 PGA. Gosh, what is that one? Or Pro Save 15, I think is what it is. But nonetheless, while I pull this up, obviously FGB Studio and LineupIQ are like the big ones that are, it's Pro Save 15. One word is the promo code that saves $15 off the monthly subscription to fantasygolfbag.com. And like I said, you can find some free trials on the site. If you scour around, they will pop up for you. Or just reach out to me. But there's a lot. The last couple of people that have subscribed reached out to me and kind of reiterated the value and what all is included, obviously, with the golf data and now with LineupIQ having a lot of other sports and more sports being added with all the groups, the auto rules, the aggregation rules, the sims, everything in between. It's pretty powerful. So I did want to plug that before we get going, because I always wait till the end, and most people are already going to the next show at that point anyway. So fantasygolfbag.com, hop in the Discord after you sign up. And like I said, use the promo codes ProSave15 that saves you $15 off per month. So a pretty good value. And like I said, you can use LineupIQ. There's no paywall for any of the other sports currently. It's wide open. So when you sign up, you obviously have access to LineupIQ for all the PGA slates, Live slates, DP World Tour, and LPGA, Showdown Classic, etc., Birdie or Better, all those different contests. And then we have MMA with projections and ownership and field lineups and tennis. And we are working after this week. We'll add some more sports like MLB is probably next up. Maybe NASCAR and then MLB. And NASCAR is pretty easy. So definitely check out fantasygolfbag.com. And obviously everything that we look at here is from Fantasy Golf Bag. So let's go ahead and jump into, let me turn that off and let's get going. So, because we got a lot to cover. Aronimink Golf Club. So PGA Championship this week, pricing came out over the weekend, and we have down to 5K pricing, but we are going to look at the odds to pricing values that we have. That's a free tool at Fantasy Golf Bag. The pricing in the 5K, a lot of the players are just not playable anyways. So it's a little bit misleading when you think about down to the 5K range. Like, it opens up salary, but most of those guys aren't viable for even making the cut even, but certainly not top 10s or top 20s that you would want for the Millie Maker or anything else that you want to play this week and do well in. So we'll look at the odds to price values. That is a good way. The FGB Studio will lead us into that. Obviously, our projections are going to be pretty strong relatively for those 5K PGA Tour players like Jordan Smith, Matt McCarty, Harry Hall, etc. But let's talk about the golf course. And what I want to do first is take like a little trip back in time to 2018 in the BMW Championship. So I have that pulled up right here. So this was the 2018 BMW Championship. It was part of the FedEx Cup playoffs, and Keegan Bradley won this week. A couple of interesting takeaways, which are pretty much relevant for everybody in the top. But you can see Keegan Bradley versus the field. Putting was a big factor for Aronimink. Off the tee, pretty minimal. Around the green, minimal. Approach was pretty minimal as well. As far as like the field average, right? You can kind of see it there. Very small. Same with the top 10. So like winners, we see, sure, typically, you can only do so much tee to green to separate yourselves from the field. There's guys like Rory or Bryson that can really separate themselves off the tee. Obviously, there's other parts of the game, and there's some guys that don't do so much off the tee, and they just have a great week on approach. They can separate themselves a bit that way. Putting's always like the final factor, where it's guys, they're all great players on the PGA Tour. They're all playing well that week, or good. I shouldn't say all. Most are playing well that week that finish in the top 20. The biggest separator is really just putting. Like, who made a few more putts each round, or just had one really good round, and that led to them winning. So you can see the leaderboard here. We can look at a few of the stats. Might be a little bit small. Let me make it bigger for you. There we go. All right. So, and I'll take myself off for now. So Keegan Bradley won at -20. So pretty low scoring event. If you look through the leaderboard, obviously this is the FedEx Cup playoffs. So the best players on the PGA Tour in 2018 are all in this field. So the top and bottom of this leaderboard is going to be, I mean, there's some mediocre players mixed in here, but for the most part, you can see, Patrick Cantlay, Jordan Spieth, Oosthuizen was playing well at that point in his career. You can all see them down here at the bottom. But you go to the top, you see a really good leaderboard, honestly. Keegan Bradley, Justin Rose, Billy Horschel, which was kind of the prime of his career up, year to date, or career to date, I should say. Xander, Rory, Webb Simpson was playing great. Tiger Woods, Ricky Fowler, Molinari had his time during that year. Tony Finau, Fleetwood, JT, Gary Woodland, Hideki, Bubba Watson, even Aaron Wise, Bryson, Brooks Koepka, Jason Kocher. I could go on down the line. Obviously, this is a good field anyways, but you can see the scoring was quite low, right? It's a par 70. We're going to look at the scorecard here in just a second, but par 70, 72, 67, we'll call it 7,300 on the scorecard. And this is the event analytics. So the driving distance breakout, there's one hole 13, average 259 off the tee. Hole 1, 6, and 18, average between 270 and 290. There was 9 between 290 and 310. So very driver heavy golf course, obviously. And then one hole 10, average 310 off the tee. The approach shot distribution with 2 less par 5s, the 200 plus comes down. But you can see this was very wet. This was a wet golf course in 2018. It was also very long rough. So I kind of picked apart, how you can decipher soft and then thick rough. The rough was like 4.5 inches. It was definitely thick. But you can see a lot of wedges. 26% of attempts was from 50 to 125. A lot from 125 to 150, 150 to 175. It was a very short golf course from an approach standpoint. It's lengthened a little bit. And again, we'll look at the scorecards comparison here in just a second. But I did want to point that out. It's a very driver heavy. You need to drive it well. You need to have good driving distance. It's not just an accuracy preference, even though the rough was 4.5 inches. And I think the softness, that's probably the only unknown kicker, I guess, that I would put out there, is with it being softer, that tends to widen the fairways. Guys don't have as much run out. They all drive it relatively straight. I mean, you guys could go to any PGA Tour event, stand on the range. Guys aren't duck hooking it and slicing it. Everyone hits it pretty well. It's just the upper echelon hit it a little bit straighter or have a little bit more control on their approach shots. So very driver heavy, a lot of mid irons, short irons, and then a few of those longer approach shots. I think it's 2 par 3s that are over 200, and then the par 5s as well. So going down, what did I look at? Traditional stats was the first thing I peeked at. So I was curious, okay, well, when I saw the 4.5 inch rough or 4 inch rough, I thought about driving accuracy. So I pulled this up first. This is the top guys in driving accuracy for the field. Bryson, Brian Gay, Henrik Stenson, no one really played great. Driving accuracy wasn't a big factor in their finish position, as far as a top finish position, I should say. The driving accuracy was not indicative of a good result. That's probably the best way to frame that. Justin Rose did finish second, but had good driving distance with the good accuracy. I mean, that's a great combo. You go down a little bit, and there's some other guys, Tiger Woods, Fleetwood, Keegan's down here a little bit, but it's, honestly, you got 67.9% up to 70 or 80%, 85% even for Bryson. it's pretty much all within like, one extra fairway every other round. Looking at driving distance was interesting though. When I go through distance, now I see Rory finished 5th, Finau finished 8th. Uline sucked because his driving accuracy was so low. So obviously there's some aspect of driving accuracy you need. Gary Woodland, T12, Dustin Johnson, T24. These guys drove it quite poorly despite the distance. They didn't finish great. Phil Mickelson, T58, Jason Day, T24, Brooks Koepka, T19. Okay. Then there's a range in here, pretty much mediocre. And then a lot of the good finishers just kind of have, how I would frame it is a good combination of they drove it well distance wise, and then their driving accuracy was above average. It wasn't crazy high. It wasn't low. Obviously low would be a bad deal. JT's kind of the outlier there. So what do we take outside of that is strokes gained. And we also have spectrum. So for strokes gained, we would go look at off the tee. So these are the top guys off the tee. No surprise, Rory was number 1, finished 5th. Tony Finau was number 2, finished 8th. A couple mediocre finishes you can see there if you're watching on video. Justin Rose, I don't know what that is. He's probably 8th in off the tee, and he finished 2nd. Off the tee is not a crazy factor either. Then let's go look at approach. A little bit closer to what really is a big factor, obviously, with scoring being -20 as a winning score. Rory again finished 5th. He was number 1. He was number 1 in off the tee and approach. Pretty incredible. Tiger Woods, Billy Horschel, Xander Schauffele, Hideki all finished in the top. They finished in the top 6. Hideki finished 15th. Francesco Molinari finished 8th. Keegan down here, top 15 or so in approach, finished 1st. Putting is the next thing I would look at. And like I said, putting is just like the factor, the X factor, if you will, of guys are all hitting it moderately similar. And we got some rain here, which is much needed here in Florida. Fantastic. Keegan, number 1 in putting, finished 1st. Xander, number 2 in putting, finished 3rd. Ricky, number 3, finished 8th. Pretty good. Webb Simpson, T6. Tommy Fleetwood, 8. Justin Rose got in the playoff, finished 2nd. Kevin Na, 12. Horschel, T3. Tony Finau, T8. So like putting is a big factor as well. So we'll just kind of take a step back. When you look at 2018 leaderboard, off the tee, moderately important. Approach, a little more important. Putting was the biggest factor, unfortunately, in what separated the top finishers from everybody else in the field. So putting is definitely going to be a factor this week. And we'll talk about how the golf course is going to play. So again, nothing too much else to take from here. This graph just basically highlights like the tee to green and putting, and you can see like the putting numbers much higher than what tee to green was for guys. So like I view that as not much of a separation tee to green as putting was. So enough beating our head against the wall there. I do want to share, let me pull it up, the scorecard. Let me just shift real quickly to stop screen share. And now I want to share this. All right. Perfect. Okay. So on the top, this is the 2018 scorecard. Again, this is scorecard yardages, not playable yardages. We know this fluctuates by several hundred yards around, possibly. For a major, it should be tipped out pretty close every round. They move it obviously for par 3s, and then they shift it around on some par 4s if they want to, basically change pin locations and have different yardages in. But large and away for a major, they should have this pretty much fitting the tipped out distances on every hole. So what has changed? Par 70, nothing's changed there. 72.67 in 2018, 73.94, 130 yards extra of yardage. Now, where do those yardages come from? You can see actually in the front 9, not much has changed. Hole 5, the par 3, they added 20 yards to the scorecard, 10 yards to the scorecard. And that's really it. Hole 7, they added, 30 yards or so. That's it for the front 9. Front 9 is pretty much unchanged. You can go hole by hole if you guys want to pause the video and look through this. I'll drop it in Discord as well. But you can see hole 5 added 10 yards, hole 7 added about 30 yards, and that is really it. No change to the front 9. Back 9 changed a little bit, but honestly not crazy. Nothing stands out. Nothing was like shocking or eye-opening to me in terms of like a par 4, maybe 440, and now all of a sudden it's 520. Nothing changed like that. But you can go through here. They added 30 yards to hole 10. Hole 14, the par 3, actually lowered their yardage all the way back from 221 to 216. I'm sure it'll play close to 220 as well, especially depending on back pin placements. Hole 15, the par 4, is very long. It went from 515 to 546. Hole 17 stayed the same, 230 yards, par 3. And then hole 18 added 30 yards to their finishing hole from 460 to 490. So yes, is it longer? Yes. Is it drastically longer? Is it certain holes? Is it spread out? No, I mean, 130 yards spread across like 6 holes, it's not a big difference. So that the distance factor might be a little bit more, but nothing crazy. And we already looked at drivers being an important factor. So driving it well, certainly a big consideration for this week. Let me hop back to the other one. Bear with me to share this again. Perfect. Okay. So those are the two things. The yardages changed slightly. The rough, I didn't pull it up, but like I said, I looked through what everything is actually higher. The rough was higher. 4.75 was what was listed in 2018. Stimp was at 12.5, so very fast greens, high rough. I expect nothing different. As far as like fairway widths, these are all pretty average, like 37 on the average width at 300 yards. So basically all these guys, they're not 37. Let me redo it. 31 yards on average. So about 120 or 90 feet wide fairways. Not overly narrow. They might shrink it a little bit for the PGA Championship. I'm not entirely sure what they're going to shape each of these, because the average of 31 yards per fairway, it fluctuates. Like there's some that are 35 yards, some are 25 yards. That obviously fluctuates hole to hole. But all I can say is the golf course played much softer in 2018 than I expected it would play this year. I think that led to better driving accuracy. They still got to hit drivers. Maybe that lends to better driving, better off the tee numbers being a factor, where if guys were maybe on the fringe, pardon the pun, of missing fairways, the softer fairways would hold it up and keep them, at least in the first cut. There's less of that this year. I expect that off the tee is going to be a little bit more of a dominant factor than what we saw in 2018, being a little bit firmer. Outside of that, let's just see really quickly. Yeah, believe it or not, this could be a big part of it too. So like I said, it's 72-60 on the scorecard. In the final round, where all the yardages got shortened, it played 6,900 yards. So really, really short for a par 70. Any par, honestly. But yeah, 6,900 yards. Let's go through like each hole or each round really quickly. Round 1 played 71-29 on the scorecard. Round 2 played 71-42. Round 3 played 69-90, so just under 7,000 yards. And then round 4, I just talked about at 6,900 yards as well. So I expect that to be tipped out more round to round. And if you look through those scores we saw, a lot of low scores in round 1, 62s there. Again, soft conditions. Round 4, a couple low scores throughout, really. I mean, you're talking about 6 or 7 under par. I expect the scoring to be bumped up, probably 2 shots, if not higher, with the field that they have this week. So that is the takeaway on the golf course. So let's dive into what else we know for Aronimink. Let me make this a little bit smaller. A little bit bigger. All right. So again, looking at Aronimink, 7,400 yards on the scorecard. This is how it played in 2018. So you can see return to par per round, 2 strokes under par. It played very easy. I don't know how they really make it that much more difficult besides just the course getting firmer. It's not, unless the rough 4.75 wasn't throughout, and I honestly just don't recall 2018 that well to know, like, was it on the fairways that rough was 4.75 or 4 inches, and then like around the greens was a little bit more mild. That is probably one of the factors that we would look at and probably just bump up overall form, because I'm not going to use a lot of recent form in FGB Studio, which we'll look at here in a second. This is the lead-in stats for 2018. Overall, pretty standard week to week, right? We talk about building a model that's a baseline model and then kind of adding in some course fit attributes, whether that's distance. I hate proximity for different yardages, but if you want to use that, you could. It's going to be a little bit more mid-irons than we've seen the last couple weeks with those longer courses. But you can see bogey or worse was number 1, believe it or not, over the last 9 months. Adjusted total strokes gained tee to green last 9 months. And then we have spectrum down here as well, spectrum total, spectrum tee to green in the last 12 months. That event was played in September. So if you think back 9 months, it's basically the entire year of 2018. Now we're sitting in May. We're really talking about looking back through the beginning of the year. I think, looking at recent form has its place. Recent form is still 5 months ago was January. You're talking about 3 or 4 months of form we're looking at now for recent form. In my model that I published as a template on FGB Studio, I am using 9 months and 1 year look back primarily. I took out the 8 weeks. I just felt like when I did some back testing for PGA Championship in May, the last 8 weeks wasn't as big of a factor. So outside of that, guys, you're more than welcome. The course summary is free right now. You can go through this and look at all the approach breakouts. If you're curious about putting, guys made a lot more putts here than they did versus the tour, I should say, here. The driving, like I said, not a huge difference in the course average, mainly because there's those 2 buckets that are 250 to 270 and 270 to 290, but a lot of drives over 300 yards. So driving's a big factor. And then the driving accuracy number is just wild to me. I think, again, I just want to attribute that to the softness of the fairways. 70.2% on a golf course that's hitting that many drivers is very, very high. And the widths aren't crazy wide. 31 yards on average is still, they should still be missing 40% of fairways. So for them to hit 70% as a field is incredibly high. Distance penalty, even back then, was a big factor. Missed fairway penalty was pretty low, surprisingly. So outside of that, everything here reflects 2018. The strong distance is leaned all the way over. I don't think that's to be negated. I just think approach, and then, the guys that maybe if you want to use Spike IQ and FGB Studio to look at putting numbers, that's probably a good way to do it too. And then again, there's your breakouts of your driving buckets. Pretty clean. Approaches we just talked about, so I don't want to kind of reiterate that. Much closer, I will say. Like if we looked at Quail Hollow last week, for all of these yardages for proximity, it was probably 5 feet or 3 to 5 feet over the tour average. And Aronimink just played easy. And again, I just want to attribute that to the softness of the golf course in 2018. And then Keegan Bradley here, his lead-in form and his form that week. So the next thing I want to do before we jump into FGB Studio, I want to look at the odds to price value, because I do think when you're building lineups, you have Scotty up here at 13.9, Rory at 12.4, Bryson 10.9, believe it or not, John Rahm at 10.4. Like, yes, it's much, much easier to play these guys when the pricing goes down to 5K. You think about on most weeks when Scotty's 12 to 14,000, and you're realistically probably playing someone that's 6,700 at the low end, and that's it, 6,500 maybe. Now you can go down to 5,500. I probably don't go much lower than that, but it is important to look at the Vegas odds and how that relates to the DraftKings pricing. So again, the odds to price value is also a free tool. pretty self-explanatory. It's basically looking at odds and where their DK pricing is relative to those odds. Is it a magic bullet for finding the best values? Not all the time, but it's definitely something that maybe brings to light pricing discrepancies. You can see Jordan Smith here has a 40-point difference between where he's priced for DraftKings and where his odds are. Doesn't mean his odds are great. He's 243 to 1. But at 5,500, there's value there by about 39 spots, or by exactly 39 spots, I should say. Harry Hall, Nikolai Hogard should be pretty popular. He's got substantial value at 6,500. All the rest here you can see are kind of the high fives. So you got Alex Fitzpatrick playing really well, Nick Taylor, Christian Bezadenhout, interestingly enough, Austin Smotherman down here with the PGA professionals, 5,300. Something to look at. I'm not going to go through every one because there's plenty of guys with value. It's just a matter of maybe like if we just, I mean, some of these low price guys don't even have odds because they're so high. But you wouldn't dare play. I should say you shouldn't dare play. Most of these PGA professionals, it's just, there's no point. Has Sean McKeel won this event before? Yeah, a decade ago. Or if not, no, longer than 2 decades ago. So it's just, there's really no point in looking at that. But when you go through these other guys, you can do it by price at the top end and look for values. You know, Hideki's got a negative value. Patrick Reed's a negative value. Ben Griffin. Siwoo Kim is the biggest one. He's got a 13-point advantage over his price tag at 7,900. And then a couple guys in the 7Ks, right? Minwoo Lee, Adam Scott, Ricky Fowler, Kurt Kitayama. So something to look at, but I would definitely use this if you want to kind of trim your player pool and you're just, you know, you can use FGB Studio and just use the top 50 guys in your model. That's totally fine. But if you want to use a little extra, we'll call it finesse, I would probably add the guys that are cheap, that have good value relative to the Vegas odds. And you can check back Tuesday and then Wednesday to get the latest odds and see if anything moves. These guys could go up, they could go down. That's probably the best way to ensure you don't have complete scrubs mixed in your player pool. Could you run lineups wide open? Sure. I would much rather prefer taking guys, getting my player pool from FGB Studio. Maybe it's the top 50. Come in here and say, okay, well, Jordan Smith's a good value. Harry Hall, Nikolai Hogard, Jorgensen, all these cheap guys that maybe just fell out of your player pool, and just add them in. And then you can make a rule in LineupIQ to say max one of these guys under 6K. You could do a group of just those guys, but if, it might be easier to say max one under 6,500 or max one under 6K. That's probably the safest bet to ensure, especially for like the Millie Maker, any of the big tournaments. Get a good player pool, add in some guys that are kind of fringe plays. They're going to be missed by most guys. All these guys should be still, 2%, 3% owned. And that'll give you a little bit more of a floor to work off of building around Scotty and Rory, John Rahm, if you want to go that route. You can do the same for FanDuel. It's just the same pricing, so a little bit different here. With that being said, we'll jump into FGB Studio. So you can always use my template. So anytime any of the admins at Fantasy Golf Bag save a template, you can see that in FGB templates. So all mine are here. I published one, which is this PGA Championship 2026 template. This is all the base stuff. And what I did, though, is I kept in 8 weeks and 6 months, and I just toggled them off. And the reason why I did that is if we go back test a little bit, this is exactly what I do each week. So let's go back to, we can do Aronimink too. We can go back to 2018 and see how this did for the PGA Championship, or the BMW Championship, I'm sorry. But this will do a model back in 2025, May 15th, 2025 for the PGA Championship field using the exact same data, same time frame of data. And then you can kind of compare each of those time frames. Like when I add in 8 weeks, it makes my model get worse. So I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. Then I went back to 2024, 2023, 2022, and that showed, I think in like 1 year, 6 months was like basically static. It didn't really shift the the correlations for the lead-in form. Let me hide this so you can see it better. But yeah, when I take these in, my results in each of those years went down just slightly. When you take that out and you use kind of the midterm form, 9 months, 12 months, and even the 2-year baseline, very good. Now, what you can also take away from this, besides the sample size of each of these, which we can do, each one of these, you can do a min rounds of, 8. Let's do min rounds, do 8 again, I guess. That's fine. You can see how that improves the model. So like in that aspect, a couple guys shifted the missed cuts that are taken out basically with small sample size, but you're still going to get a mix of guys in a major championship that grade out really well, still miss the cut. But large and away, if you look through this the top of this model, which is blended of these 5 time frames and different stats in each one, you got Scotty. I'm not going to victory lap Scotty winning any tournament that's number 1 in your model. It just is what it is. But like Bryson T2, John Rahm T8, Neiman T8, Rory finished T47. Pretty good finishes through here. Siwoo Kim T8, Keegan Bradley T8, on down the list. So that is what I did. And now if we go back to 2026, we can use that same thing. I'm going to do the same with the sample size, because there are plenty of guys with only a couple rounds. I'll just take them out. Just like that. And then this is the overall model. I can do, well, you can't see that well. You can see John Rahm's number 1, believe it or not. You take it off 8 weeks and 6 months, he's still number 1. We pull in the live data. It's field adjusted. He's been playing really well tee to green. It is what it is. I mean, if you guys want to counter live and go against, that's totally fine. He's been playing great. What he did at the Masters, I think, is somewhat fluky. But like I said, we do a lot of work to adjust the fields for the PGA Tour, even when guys come over, and then live. I trust this pretty well, that any of this data that has John Rahm, 1, 2, or 3, it's very accurate. So Cameron Young in the last 6 months, Scotty in the last 8 weeks, he's playing great, obviously. Cameron Young, number 2. So you can see how that shifts around. If you take off the 2 years, Cameron Young bumps up. So any way you want to slice it, you can do that here. So pretty fun way to tinker. You can do some, a par 70 model if you wanted to throw that in there. I hate doing par breakouts. I don't think, guys, it's not in our data that shows that anybody that plays well on par 70s plays well on all par 70s. It's not a predictive metric, but you can certainly go to course par 70, apply it. Sample size is going to drop. You're going to have to go back, a year. Sample size still isn't going to be great. That's the other part of par 70s. They're just not played that often, especially on live. You can see that there. But that's just different ways you can slice it. So I'm going to take that out because I don't want to use par 70. And then I'm just going to walk through kind of the top guys and who stands out in each price range just quickly. Now, if you're familiar with, how we preach to do modeling, which is pretty robust in the sense of picking out, essentially modeling just like you would for a betting model. The baselines are going to represent the best players in the field, and DraftKings doesn't get that wrong, and Vegas doesn't get that wrong. So you can see, generally speaking, in the top 10, there's no one. You shouldn't generally see anybody up here. You can see someone maybe worse. That's fine. But you shouldn't see anybody that's like in the top 10 priced at $7,500. Like you're either, I mean, I don't know any other way to slice it. Your model is going to be quite inaccurate if you're that far removed from what Vegas interprets and what DraftKings pricing interprets, because they're, generally speaking, pretty accurate for reflecting how the player pool is going to pan out this week. So the top range here, John Rahm priced 4th he's number 1. Scotty Scheffler, number 2. Rory, number 3. Bryson, like I said, we have the live data in here. He has not been great. Driving distance is one thing. I'm just not too excited to play Bryson, especially if we consider we just looked at the putting and the approach play being a big factor. Cameron Young, 10-2, number 4. Matt Fitzpatrick at 10K, he's number 6. And then if we go down to 9,700, Tommy Fleetwood, 7. So when you're building lineups, when you go into LineupIQ, you should be getting a good mix of multiple guys in this range in every lineup. You might want to set a group if you want to do at least 2, maybe a max of 2 if you want. But I think what you can do is as long as you kind of cap out the bottom range of your player pool in LineupIQ, you should not run into an issue with completely gross lineups of jamming in, Scotty, Rahm, Cameron Young, and then having like 2 6K guys and a 5K guy. That's not going to pan out well. And large and away, we've done this analysis before. In majors, balanced builds tend to do the best. Scotty has been extremely difficult the last couple of years with him winning at a 14K price tag. But large and away, when you look through the pricing, these guys that are all kind of mid-range, they have very good likelihood to finish in the top 10, despite the model ranking, which you can use percentiles to see a better reflection of their true form, I guess, relative to the other players. But yeah, I mean, balanced builds is certainly a good path forward in majors. You're going to get a better floor. You're likely going to have as much of a ceiling as any other lineup. You're just banking a little bit less on one of the top 5 guys winning the tournament, which, like I said, besides Scotty, hasn't been a problem up until 2022. So, yeah, that's the top range. Let's go down into the 8K range. Patrick Cantley, surprisingly, is 14th in this entire field. He's priced at 8,900. Joaquin Niemann down here, 8,200. Really good form from 2 years ago. If we were to bump 2 years out, include more recent form, he should go down. Where'd he go? Yeah, still pretty good, actually. 15th. We can look at his form over the last couple of starts. Really good off the tee numbers, and that's Spectrum. Really good off the tee numbers for strokes gain. Approach has been kind of back and forth. Putting, inconsistent, to say the least. But the ball striking numbers have been pretty good. Going back to FGB Studio. So the rest of the guys in this 8K range that really stand out. Russell Henley, Cantley we just talked about. Going down a little bit further, Siwoo Kim is probably going to be one of the most popular plays this week for good reason. Been playing fantastic all year. Not a great finish last week, but Siwoo Kim, as far as ball striking goes, I think this is a really good course fit for him too. Jake Knapp's injured, so just kind of be cautious there. I don't think he's withdrawn. I think he's trying to play, but I probably don't even. If you've withdrawn two tournaments in a row, I just don't see you having much upside. So yeah, that's my take on Jake Knapp. Probably just take him out. JJ Spawn's playing much better of late. Adam Scott at 7,500. And then plenty of guys, like I talked about, a top 50 in your model is probably a good threshold to start with for a player pool. All these guys are kind of in that 20 to 40 range. So, like I said, Russell Henley, Jordan Spieth, Robert McIntyre, who was that? Sepp Straka, Maverick McNeely, Akshay Bhatia. All those guys are very valid plays this week. Going down a little bit into the 7K range, we got the mid sevens, all showing really well. Adam Scott, Minwoo Lee, Ricky Fowler, Keegan Bradley, Gary Woodland, Kurt Kitayama. I mean, I'm not saying every lineup needs to have one of those guys. Certainly wouldn't say that. But certainly being in your player pool and having decent exposure to that group of players is a big factor. Could all those guys dud? I mean, maybe not dud, but finish outside the top 20? Yeah, it's possible. But yeah, I would certainly be targeting these mid 7K guys and putting a little bit more attention into making sure my exposures match up what I want. Because Because and again, LineupIQ does a very good job with the portfolios and the correlations of lineups. You shouldn't get overexposed to anybody, but it's possible you could get overexposed to a couple players versus others in this range. And what I mean by that is maybe Adam Scott, which I haven't run projections yet, maybe Adam Scott has like a 2-point bump over Ricky Fowler or Keegan. Now, all of a sudden, when you run LineupIQ, you're going to get a little bit more of a push to Adam Scott than those other players. And by the end of it, with your 20 lineups or 10 lineups or however many, you have 20 or 30% of Adam Scott. You didn't get any of Keegan, didn't get any of Ricky Fowler. So just be careful of that. You can make caps and make sure you can spread out. You can do min exposures as well. But that's the only thing I would point out to when you're running lineups is there is a big group in the 7K to upper 6K range that are very valid. You just want to be sure you're getting enough diversity, which, again, LineupIQ does very well. But I still want to have the oversight to make sure it fits what I'm expecting. Sudarshan, 6,900, playing well, obviously. Brian Harmon playing better lately. Nikolai Hogard, 6,500, should have quite a bit of him. Finished second last week. Another good fit, obviously. And then going down into the low sixes before we hit the 5K. So David Puig from Liv. I don't think the driving distance narrative is as big of a factor. We just kind of walk through the golf course and why good driving is a big factor. But I don't think driving distance is overly should be overly inflated here. Christopher Reeton playing well, good one. Thomas Dietrich, Alex Fitzpatrick, again, smaller sample size, playing very, very well. Coming off the Zurich Classic win with his brother, and then 2 back-to-back good weeks at Doral, finished T9, and then Truist finished 4th. I mean, really good. There's nothing here. I mean, I could kind of nitpick the off the tee number a little bit, but it's definitely within the range of outcomes to gain 0.2 versus he could have gained 2 strokes versus lost half a stroke. Not too concerned there. He's playing very well. Putting's a little bit of a concern, but he's 6,500. What are we going to do? Or 5,900, I'm sorry, 5,900. Nick Taylor, very consistent. Just seems like a safer play. Going down, Bud Cauley. I think Matt McCarty stands out quite a bit. Playing well in the last 8 weeks. You can see how much higher up he's bumped versus his 12-month, 9-month, 6-month time frame. He's now 27th in the last 8 weeks in this field. So if you just even if you just wanted to run off of recent form alone, Matt McCarty would be priced in the upper 7Ks. So Matt McCarty is a very good play at 5,700 as well. Matt Wallace, better than I expected, to be honest, but been playing a decent share of him, 5,600 for him. And then as we get into the 5Ks, like I said, I don't see many of these guys popping, which is why the Vegas odds should help direct you towards guys that are worth at least keeping in the player pool. And if you get to them or don't, it's not a big deal. But blindly excluding all these guys, probably not ideal. Like if you're playing 3 lineups, then you can be a little bit more of a nit over which guys you do or don't want to play. But like I said, if you go down in this 5K range, besides those, Alex Fitzpatrick, a couple guys in the upper 5s, there's really nobody down here that I would want to play anyways. It's just a matter of lineups, building lineups with the top guys. Jordan Smith here. There's a couple other ones that had good values. Austin Smotherman doesn't grade out well. Very good value at 5,300. Those are the guys that I would include for sure in the player pool. And then as we go down, I think any of these guys are just X amount. No worries. And again, that's just to reiterate, you can go through this, blindly run a model. And I say blindly loosely, like you can put a lot of work into this. You can take your top 50 guys, top 70 guys even. You're still probably not going to capture enough of the 5K guys that still have some upside. And when you go build lineups in LineupIQ, I think it's a good, important concept to have a mix of both balanced and some like stars and scrubs lineups, especially with the pricing for those top guys. So you could certainly see a forecast where, 3 of these guys, if not 5 of these guys, finish in the top 5. You're going to want to have 2 of them, if not 3 of them, and then get lucky with those 5K guys that finish inside the top 10 or top 15. That's really like the biggest takeaway. So with that being said, let me do a filter on I want less. There we go. That's 80 guys, pretty high, but we're going to jump into LineupIQ with that player pool. And I can't run lineups because I haven't loaded any of the updated projections yet. But like I said, you can hop to the PGA Championship. What did I just click? PGA? Yeah, PGA Championship is, and then we have FanDuel in there. Okay. So like for DraftKings, we can run some rules. First, I'm going to set my player pool to the 79 I just favorited. I'm going to go down. Let's just see how many 5K guys I have in here. So I use the top 80. We got a handful, maybe 12 guys, 15 guys in the 5Ks is probably okay. But like I said, there's still others that have good value from the Vegas odds. And you can throw those in here and just build out a bigger pool for those cheap guys. Because honestly, I don't want to have 20% of any of these guys. I would much rather have 5% to 10% or less and spread it out. Then I'm just trying to get lucky with which one of those guys gets paired with the right combo at the top. Like I said, you could throw Bud Colley, or even if it was Alex Fitzpatrick, you just feel so confident about it. If he's in 30% of your lineups, that's taking away from other guys like Matthew McCarty, Nick Taylor, Harry Hall played good last week. That's what I don't want. So you can do a rule, which is what I would do. Just set a rule you can do an auto or manual. You can do a manual rule and select the players. Do an auto rule and say use no more than one player less than 6,000. That is 80 guys in total. We only have a handful of those because we've selected them, and then run lineups off of that. And that'll ensure you can do 2, you can do 1. If you want to build some, maybe you do another build with, max 0 or exactly 0. That might be a good way to get more balanced. You can see how the exposures fluctuate for the top range. And what I mean by that is if you exclude the 5Ks completely, you're naturally going to get into builds that are going to be, Cameron Young down to Akshay Bhatia and just kind of mix in a bunch of guys in the mid-range. And I kind of like that. At least having some exposure to different types of builds is also a good strategy. So we'll do, we had a nice video last week I did with Darren on Wednesday. Kind of walked through almost every tool, walking through how to use it and how best to interpret it. We'll probably do another video, if at least solo for me, on Wednesday night or Wednesday afternoon. And I'll walk through like my build process with the final player pool that I'm going to use. And like I said, you can, in LineupIQ is pretty cool for any of the sports that we offer. If you import your DK entries, go to, reserve your lineups on DraftKings, go to DK and export your entries, your edit entries CSV file. If you load it in here, you can then it'll populate for you, but you can populate the number of lineups you want to build. So if you're doing 50 entries in the $25, then you go build your lineups. And when you run the sims, it'll build off of that player pool, the field lineups for that contest. So makes it really easy. It'll spit out the lineups exactly, that fit your CSV. All you have to do is export, upload to DraftKings, and you're done. You could literally be done in 2 minutes or 5 minutes. So the last thing I am going to do, because we did talk about the softness of Aronimink in 2018, I'm just going to look at the weather leading into this. So Monday, today, pretty mild. No rain, moderate wind. Okay, nothing crazy. Tuesday, again, no rain, cooler temperatures, a little bit windy, a little bit gustier, but nothing crazy. So again, I'm just kind of looking at the rain forecast, if anything. Wednesday, got a little bit of rain overnight. You can see that pick up here at 4 p.m. So maybe Wednesday gets a little bit of rain. And then Thursday, we have the hour by hour. So you can see here as far as how the rain and the wind shakes out. So there is a forecast, a very small amount of rain, talking about 20% chance on Thursday. Wind 10 to 20 gusts. And then Friday, no rain or very little forecast. We're talking 6%, much windier. So gust up to 20 to 25. So again, I forecast the course playing a bit firmer than it did in 2018. I think that'll help with the guys that you want to target with the good driving. It's going to be a better preference on overall good drivers, not just raw distance. And then unfortunately, it's going to kind of boil down to guys that, approach plays its part every week, but the putting from where they're hitting their approaches. So might as well finish it up with the weekend. And again, we're 5 days out, but pretty mild on Saturday, just gusty. It looks like it's gusty every day. And then for Sunday, very gusty. That could be interesting if that holds true. We're talking about 20 to 30 mile per hour gusts. So we'll see how it shakes out over the next couple of days. But that's the biggest takeaway. I mean, the weather is what it is. We'll look at it as it gets closer. I just think it's going to play firmer than it did in 2018, and that's really the main driver of how this golf course can play as far as difficulty. The PGA, if it was the U.S. Open, maybe I would think they tricked it up a little bit, but for the PGA, I'm not sure how they can do that. So I think that is all she wrote for today, guys. Like I said, you can check this out at fantasygolfbag.com. We have a ton of stuff that's free. All the big tools like FGB Studio and LineupIQ, which I would encourage you guys to check out all weekend, because we have all the showdown slates, captain slates, projections and ownership, and field lineups for all. Pretty cool. It's been fantastic. A really good year so far. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's Fantasy Golf Bag podcast. Hop in the Discord if you have not already, and then we will be tossing around ideas. I'll drop the scorecards in there here in just a minute, and then we'll look to have another show on Wednesday night as well. All right, guys. Best of luck this week. Should be a fun watch, if anything. Not the most exciting golf course, but we'll see how it ends up playing out. We'll see how far wrong I am. So best of luck, guys. See ya.